The night was silent, yet beneath its stillness moved 48 trucks carrying the weight of betrayal. Not grain, not medicine, but $700 million worth of hidden steel, rocket launchers cloaked under sacks of rice, a caravan not meant to feed the hungry, but to choke a nation before a single shot was fired. And Burkina Faso, often dismissed as peripheral, suddenly became the center of a storm, written not in treaties, but in crates and barcodes. And in that storm stood one man, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who refused to wait for dawn, because when the order came from Ouagadougou's command room, it was not panic that stirred the troops, but resolve. Resolve to intercept, to expose, to turn silence into testimony. And what began as whispers in the dark hours of August 19th would unfold into revelations, shaking the foundations of power across continents. For this was no longer about borders. This was about the dignity of a continent long treated as a warehouse instead of a homeland. And at precisely 3:47 a.m., Captain Moussa Kabor pressed his eyes to the thermal scope, muttering words that would ripple across Africa. There is something wrong. For what he saw was no cluster of farmers moving toward early markets, nor aid trucks bearing grain, but a convoy, 48 trucks, headlights cut, plates stripped, slithering along a dirt track near Kanaiba to avoid checkpoints. And within minutes, his report raced through encrypted lines into the capital, where President Traoré stood in the command. Center red glow of satellite feed painting his face. And with calm certainty he spoke. Scramble the special units. Get drones airborne. Intercept them. Not one round must go astray. And the room obeyed, boots rushing, UAVs lifting into the sky, commandos cutting through scrubland to choke the road ahead. Until at 4:06 a.m., the convoy was trapped at a three-way junction. No firefight, no resistance, only drivers frozen in headlights, some trembling, one attempting to reverse before being blocked. And then tarpaulins were peeled back, and the silence, thickened as beneath labels of agricultural tools, emerged dark green crates, locks cracked, torchlights spilling across brand-new AK-47s glinting like teeth, and 16 rifles sealed in foam, grenade launchers wrapped in oilcloth, belts of 7.62 millimeters stacked like grain sacks, radio jammers, encrypted comms gear, RPG tubes, tactical vests, drone parts, explosives, every truck a rolling arsenal. Not smuggling but mobilization, not contraband but conspiracy. And when General Zirbo called in, his voice unflinching, "Mr. President, you need to hear this yourself." The phone was passed to Kaber's unit reporting, "Sir, this isn't aid, it is a mobile army." And Traoré gave no pause. Detain every driver, lock down the perimeter, track every signal, trace every plate, map their origins within 2 hours. And by dawn, the puzzle was unraveling. Routes diverged only to converge near the border. Plates falsified, SIM cards swapped, chaos designed as camouflage. Yet serial numbers etched faintly into crates betrayed their origins. One batch traced to Libyan surplus after civil war, another to Yemeni stockpiles, and most damning, pristine boxes bearing NATO-linked factory codes from southern Europe. And in the bunker, the question fell heavy. Who had the power to move such weapons unseen? And why target Burkina Faso first, a country small in wealth but rich in defiance? And logistics officers calculated the staggering value, $700 million, not counting encrypted systems, SATCOM arrays, drone components, demolition gel, and the truth grew clear. This was not contraband for profit, it was orchestration. Somewhere far beyond Burkina Faso's borders, a decision had been made to destabilize, to remove, to replace. And though the 48 trucks were stopped, the deeper truth was only beginning to show its face, because betrayal wears many masks. Sometimes uniforms, sometimes suits, sometimes diplomatic passports that don't exist in any flight log. And so as dawn bled into Ouagadougou, warehouses were raided, 23 in one night, revealing caches of rifles stacked in pyramids, mortar tubes leaning against walls, manuals in French and English beneath drone shells, tons of explosive gel mislabeled as mining supply, camouflage kits, encrypted radios still tethered to foreign servers. And alongside the crates came the names. 2 former ministers, one from Interior, one from Energy, a retired general with international ties, 3 businessmen whose empires sprawled across Burkina's contracts, and 4 foreign nationals, 2 French, 1 American, 1 Israeli, all bearing diplomatic passports forged like theater props. And when they were dragged into high-security cells, the capital trembled, streets filled with rumor, and then the name Francongo fell like thunder, the untouchable magnate handshaker. Of presidents, darling of European banquets, philanthropist by day, shadow banker by night, now sitting beneath a single light as intercepted wire transfers, Cayman shell accounts, and manifest logs were laid before him. And when pressed he exhaled, folding his hands, and said the words that stiffened every spine. This isn't about weapons. It was never about weapons. It was about timing, power, control. And then 4 words heavier than any rifle. Operation Restore Democracy, a project budgeted at $1 billion, plotted in hotel lobbies of Accra, money routed through Paris, approval whispered in Washington, uniforms already tailored, ministries assigned, transition council prearranged, and he confessed, voice cracking, we were all promised something. I was promised finance minister, and thus the mask was torn. Not rogue smuggling, but a transaction scripted across continents, sovereignty. Sold in contracts, betrayal measured in billions, and Traoré listened not with shock, but with iron resolve, declaring this was not rebellion, but transaction. And ordering archives scraped, satellites rewound. Every warehouse searched until no shadow remained, because betrayal would not be buried in silence, but dragged into light. And yet with light came risk, because embassies hissed threats of sanctions. Western outlets painted Ouagadougou reckless. Experts on panels called it naive, but in the streets, defiance burned brighter. Demonstrations rising with banners painted in raw strokes. Trade not aid. Sovereignty is not for sale. And then in Independence Square, the president himself lifted the first seized rifle and cast it into a furnace, flames roaring, metal screaming as sparks lit the night, and he spoke, "They wanted war, we will give them schools," and one by one weapons meant to tear children apart were melted into bells for classrooms. 100 schools, 50 clinics, 1,000 kilometers of irrigation pledged from fire. And in that act, symbolism fused into blueprint, betrayal transmuted into future. The nation reminded that dignity was not for auction in Paris hotels, not for negotiation in offshore banks, but forged in fire and placed in the hands of children holding books instead of rifles. And across Africa, whispers turned to echoes. Thomas Sankara's ghost seemed to walk again, his words reborn in Traoré's defiance. For sovereignty was not theory, it was action, it was refusal, it was courage. And though Burkina Faso knew the storm was not over, though sanctions threatened, though betrayals festered, though conspiracies webbed across the Sahel, one truth could not be erased. The 48 trucks were stopped, their secrets spilled, their financiers unmasked, and Africa, for the first time in generations, had seen a leader stare into the face of orchestrated collapse and answer, not with surrender, but with fire.